It's all about money. At the HouseStreet.com Money Expo, see Danielle Park, video by Doug Casey, Ross Clark, Marin Katusa, and David Smith. To attend free, pre-register now at moneyexpo.ca. That's moneyexpo.ca.
Welcome to the Money and Wealth Show, brought to you this week by American Manganese Incorporated. Here's your host, Sterling Fox.
Welcome to the Money and Wealth Show, where each week we offer you opinions on finance, the markets, and the economy. Our guest this week is Professor Gerolymatos from the Department of Hellenic Studies at Vancouver's Simon Fraser University. Andre, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Good to be back.
Professor Gerolymatos is also a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on National Security. Andre, last time you were on our program, it was a while ago, to talk about Greece during the economic crisis that still hasn't gone away, but we needed to learn a lot about Greece, and with your capable assistance, that's exactly what we did. We've invited you back to join us again today because we want to talk about the Middle East. But before we get to that, I would really appreciate your thoughts about the recent calamity in Japan.
Certainly. I mean, it is a great tragedy, and it's also a reminder that we are not stronger than nature, no matter how powerful we become, how advanced, how technologically, artful and skillful. Nature can step in and just wreck everything, as it did in the case of Japan, and a lot of people have paid a dear price over there. And
of course, the economic ripple effect of that tragedy, we haven't even begun to feel it, despite the fact the markets have panicked. This is going to be a mega billion-dollar, if not even trillion-dollar job before putting Japan back together again is finished, isn't it?
Certainly, because as we can see, they're having a lot of difficulties with their nuclear power plants. So I wouldn't be surprised that at the end of all this, they may have to revamp all of them or even rebuild them or, certainly fortify them.
We are also hearing that in southwestern British Columbia, here in Victoria and Vancouver, individuals have decided to, I think, panic a little too much. The supplies of iodine at pharmacies throughout Metro Vancouver and southern Vancouver Island are empty. It is sold out. Why are people moving to that panic point so quickly, this far away?
Some of them remember the Chernobyl crisis. Some of them, listen to the news, maybe catch a bit of the news. You know how we have a 24-hour news cycle. So depending when you tune in, you may hear something that's the completion of a sentence that sounds something really terrible, like there's, radiation that will be coming to British Columbia. So people have overreacted and are stockpiling on iodine pills. They should be aware that these things are not to be taken unless there's a danger of radiation because, they're foreign to the body and they could do more harm than good.
Right. And that's an important message to pass along, and we appreciate that. And doubtless many health professionals will be reinforcing that message in the weeks and days ahead. Andre, it's great to have you here because we did invite you to speak to us about the Middle East. You are a national security expert. The Middle East is your area of expertise. And we've seen unrest and rebellion in Tunisia, now Egypt, in Libya, and the domino effect is well underway. What do you make of what we've seen so far?
It's a wake-up call for the leadership of the region that you can only keep people suppressed for so long. And of course, it all began with the high price of food. The average income is something like $2 a month in Egypt, and half of that goes to pay for food. So when food goes up, it really cuts into people's well-being as individuals and as families. So that caused, that created the bedrock for protest, followed by youth. One thing they didn't understand is that half the population of Egypt is under the age of 30. And, these people use the internet and Facebook, at least those who can afford it. And as we saw in some of the documentaries about the Egyptian security service, they arrested one of the leaders of the uprising who was working on Facebook, and they were torturing the guy to give them, so he could give them the password of Facebook. They didn't know that it was open.
Right,
that you can just get on it. Right? So it's
how
an
much
older
does that
generation.
regime know about social networking? Not very.
Very little.
Right.
And it's indicative of how little they know about the world of these young people. So it worked in Tunisia, it spilled over into Egypt. From Egypt, it's gone to Bahrain, to Saudi Arabia, to Yemen, Libya. Each country has different local circumstances why it's going on, but the cumulative effect is that we're going to have a changing world as far as the Middle East is concerned.
Back here on the home front, Andre, we go to the supermarket, we go to buy gas, the price of energy is up, and we certainly, all of us, know the price of food is up and rising daily. Most of us are able to incorporate that uncomfortable reality into our daily lives. We buy a little less of this, we buy a little more of that. But in countries like North Africa, where the wages are so low, when the price of food goes up, it really does make the difference between food or no food, not quality of on a daily intake basis, as would be our case, doesn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And you know, half the population of Egypt is in dire straits. It's extremely poor. 50% of Egypt's budget goes to subsidize food, and there's no more money, you know, in the cupboard. I mean, that's it. That's all they have. So even though the revolution, if we can call it that, has been successful, all it's done is it's forced Mubarak to step down. The army is still in charge. And I think that has gone a long way in giving some security to the markets, because they see that there's a steady hand in Egypt. There's not going to be a radical regime replacing Mubarak. It's still the military.
Exactly. Our guest this week on the Money and Wealth Show is a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on National Security, Simon Fraser University professor Andre Gerolymatos. And we'll be back with more after this.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision.
American Manganese Inc. has a world-class deposit in Arizona, indicated 6.7 billion pounds, inferred 8.9 billion pounds, potentially the lowest cost producer of electrolytic manganese. American Manganese Inc. has a projected cash cost of 44 cents a pound. The metal trades near $2 a pound. Do the math. Trading symbol AMY. Visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 604-531-9639.
You're watching The Money and Wealth Show, archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Here's your host, Sterling Fox.
Welcome back to the Money and Wealth Show. Our special guest this week is Professor Andre Gerolymatos from Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. Andre is also a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on National Security. He's here with us today to talk about the Middle East. This is a different part of the world for us to try and understand. First and foremost, as a Middle East national security expert, are there security issues that we in Canada should be worried about?
Certainly. I mean, the price of oil will have a huge impact on the world economy, thus an impact on Canadian economy. And it isn't just the price of gas at the pump. It's the price of everything that's made out of petroleum, you know,
right.
Plastics and all the other things that we use. The other factor, of course, is, you know, chaos. The region could easily drift towards chaos, which would mean some type of intervention, which, of course, would then really make the money markets panic.
And of course, there's always that element of the unexpected, and we're now dealing particularly with Gaddafi in Libya, and there are other more aggressive regimes who seemingly, Andre, from this distance, don't have a problem killing their own people if it obstructs the objectives of the regime.
Well, certainly in the case of Gaddafi, he has no qualms about killing his own people, and, you know, a lot of his armed forces and a lot of his security is made up of African mercenaries.
Right, right.
And they don't care. They'll kill anybody, you know, for money. And this is why the death toll is so high in Libya, as opposed to, you know, even Egypt and even Yemen, where there, you know, there's been firing by the police against demonstrators, but it's minuscule in comparison to Libya.
So why hasn't he been taken out? Why Gaddafi? And you're right, he's surrounded by mercenaries, and he's fairly vulnerable, and there are certainly there are allied ships and installations around the area. Why hasn't somebody said, this guy's a monster, and he's only going to kill more thousands of his own people and upset the balance in the region even more? He has to be taken down.
He cannot be taken down by the West. You know, it would cause a huge backlash in the Middle East, even though he's not popular in the Arab world at all. However, some of the steps that have been taken, the Arab League has called for a no-fly zone, and that has given the NATO in particular, could give NATO in particular a mandate to impose a no-fly zone, but not the United States. The United States has to act in concert through a major international body like the UN or an alliance like NATO to impose a no-fly zone. Beyond that, it becomes very complicated. You know, boots on the ground. Well, if you do it in Libya, why not in other countries that are in upheaval?
Right.
But I wouldn't rule out, for example, you know, advisors being sent in or weapons being given to the rebels to fight Gaddafi.
Well, it's such a strange scenario for us. I mean, you want to cheer for the rebels, the people who are for human rights and for democracy and against these just awful, awful, despotic, dictatorial regimes. And at the same time, their efforts are causing a ripple effect right into our turf with increased energy costs, which in turn, as you've already explained, increases the cost of food. That has to get trucked around from supplier to store to buyer, etc., all of which is increasing the cost of food. So we sit here with conflicted intentions as we watch all of this happen.
For certain parts of the Middle East, you know, Saudi Arabia, for example, if the monarchy was overthrown, the people who would take over are going to be the Wahhabi clerics, who are much harsher than the current regime.
Right.
So in this case, it's okay to cheer for the Saudi royal family because they are, in a sense, keeping back much more dictatorial types who would take over the country. In the case of Libya, of course, it's not difficult to cheer for the rebels who are going to hopefully overthrow Gaddafi eventually.
But we're all, of course, as we did last summer with your help with Greece and the southern European countries that were having economic difficulties, now we're learning more about the Middle East. And there are countries like Jordan and Syria and Bahrain and others that, Yemen you've mentioned as well. As this is the domino effect, and this is one of the reasons we're happy to have you with us today, because we watch Tunisia, Egypt, that was pretty easy. Next came Libya, much uglier, but again, sequentially, pretty easy. Yeah. What's next?
Countries like Oman, you know, they've been demonstrations there. Morocco, certainly. Algeria, there've been demonstrations. You know, they percolate up and they percolate down, but they're there. They're not going to go away. It's only a matter of time before there are many dramatic changes affecting the Middle East. The difficulty for the leadership is how rapidly can they adapt to these changes before they turn into revolution. In places like Jordan, you see there have been more effective moves by the king of Jordan.
Sure.
And it's worked to some degree. But, you know, it opens up the door. People want more and more. And these monarchies, dictatorships have to be prepared to give that extra. And we'll see what's going to happen in Egypt in the future, for example. The military is running the show, but are they going to make enough liberal concessions to pacify that body of young people who believe that they're on the road to democracy? But so far it hasn't happened.
And the other thing that you mentioned about the contributing factors to all of this unrest was the rising cost of food, of course, and young people, period. A lot of these young people are pretty well educated, and an unfortunately high percentage of them, Andre, are unemployed. So there's a lot of young, smart people with too much time on their hands.
Exactly, and the way the economies are in these countries, they'll never will be employed.
So they recognize that and realize the only way anything's going to change is that they take matters into their own hands.
Absolutely.
Have leaderships evolved out of this? Are we seeing coalitions of interests forming into parties that one day might end up forming government in any of these countries yet?
That's a very good question. I think the advantage and disadvantage of these movements is that they don't have a defined leadership. It makes it very difficult for the Mubaraks and the Gaddafis to decapitate them. If you know that there's 10, 15, 20, 30 people who are leading the movement, arrest them, shoot them, and it's over.
Right.
But these are leaderships that are diffused. There are many, many leaders. And no one knows how they're going to emerge in the post-Gaddafi era or even what's going on in Egypt.
In a lot of these countries, of course, opposition parties have simply never been allowed or tolerated for 2 seconds.
Totally, and that's what happens with a dictatorship. It destroys the moderate middle, so you end up with two extremes at the end of the process.
Learning a lot about the Middle East, we hope, with the capable assistance of this week's special guest, Professor Andre Gerolymatos from Simon Fraser University. Back with more on the Money and Wealth Show after this.
The Money and Wealth Show is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Molycorp Gold Corp has substantial assets. Magnesium deposit, inferred 52 billion pounds. Molybdenum deposit, indicated 1.9 million tons. Inferred 1.8 million tons at 0.087% MO. Past silver producer, average 182 ounces per ton. Trading symbol, MOR. Website, molycorp.com. Or phone me, Larry Ray, at 604-531-9639.
You're watching The Money and Wealth Show, archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. Here's your host, Sterling Fox.
Welcome back to the Money and Wealth Show. We're in conversation with Professor Andre Gerolymatos from Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. Andre is also a member of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on National Security. I wish I could tell you more about that, but he would have to kill me if I did. We're talking about the Middle East today, and we're learning a lot about countries that we frankly don't talk about a lot. Now, Saudi Arabia, we talk about a lot because they're the biggest oil provider in the region. Bahrain, right next door to it, Andre, is a tiny little principality where the U.S. 6th Fleet, I believe, or 5th Fleet is based, but that's about all we know about these people, and yet we're finding out from newscasts in recent days, there is a group of dissenters in that country very sympathetic to what we've seen happen in Egypt and Tunisia already. What's the future for Bahrain with the dissenters particularly?
Bahrain is evolving as a kind of a political football between Iran and Saudi Arabia. You know, Iran is a Shiite-dominated country, and Saudi Arabia is the leader, or sees itself as the leader of the Sunni Muslims.
Okay.
And the majority of the population of Bahrain is Shia. The monarchy is Sunni. So the people of Bahrain have been demanding reforms, but not the overthrow of the monarchy. But, you know, monarchies, once there's opposition in the streets, they get really panicky.
Sure.
And so what Bahrain has done is they've asked for military support from Saudi Arabia, and they're getting it. There are now Saudi troops in Bahrain. This will no doubt enrage the Iranians, and they've already begun persecuting Sunni Muslims in Iran. So we're going to see an escalation of tensions in the Gulf between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and of course that's going to have economic ramifications in the future.
Well, you know, the shadowy, sinister figure of Iran keeps getting brought up into these conversations. They're always in the mix somewhere, certainly in Afghanistan and Iraq as we speak. So what's the point? Why would they take such great interest in messing up the balance in a tiny little country like Bahrain? What's to be gained for them?
To take over, to expand their influence. I mean, the Shiites of Iran, that leadership, and it's a clerical leadership, they see that their goal is to expand their brand of Islam all over the Muslim world. So whenever there's chaos, there's opportunity. And this is opportunity for Iran to expand its spheres of influence, as it's happening in Bahrain.
What can Canada do in all of this, as a nation, not as individuals, but as a country? You advise the Prime Minister, along with a group of other experts, on matters like this. What, if anything, can our country do to make that part of the world a little better?
First is not to overreact. There's a lot of change that is taking place. And secondly, what is important for us is to promote the role of international bodies such as the United Nations or NATO, that there should be multilateral, action, not unilateral intervention, which will cause, a greater crisis.
And that's about the extent of our ability to really influence the outcome of any of the events. This is not our corner of the world, is it?
No, nor that of the United States, even though they have much greater interests in that part of the world.
Well, their strategic interests, they, of course, have 10 times the population and a lot bigger military than we'll ever have. And so you have this movement headed by John McCain, for example, in the States, who really say, we are the world's policemen. And when there is a situation like a Gaddafi, he really should be taken down. And if nobody else is going to step up to the plate, well, then, damn it, America should. What kind of trouble is he inviting?
He is putting America in a very awkward and potentially very dangerous situation, because if the United States adopts that role as the policeman of the world,
right,
and they get into the Middle East, first of all, they don't have the troops. They are really thinly stretched in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So where are they going to find the troops to get in there with such tremendous force in order to be able to swing events their way? Secondly, they already have enough enemies. They're going to just create more. It is much wiser to operate through things like the Arab League, through the United Nations, the Security Council, and NATO, and kind of stay in the background. They're not the most popular country in the world, and right now what they're doing in Japan, for example, is much more proactive and very nice and very kind, and it's getting brownie points for them in Asia. But I think intervention would be a very dangerous thing.
And yet there, of course, is the frustration of those of us in what we used to call the free world, watching this evolution occur, Andre, at a snail's pace, knowing that a little push and a nudge from the outside might really accelerate and ameliorate the process.
Very much so, and it might expand to other parts of the world. Europe, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if, what's going on in the Middle East may inspire young people in Italy, in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal, and other parts that are being hit very hard by the economic situation.
So bottom line, as is usually the case when you look at these crises, it's follow the money, ultimately, isn't it?
Definitely.
And when you don't have any, then it's even easier to follow, because those are the ones that want it.
Absolutely.
In a moment, our guest, Professor Andre Gerolymatos, will have the final word.
The Money and Wealth Show is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Gold Ray Resources Corp. is developing a gold mine in China. Identified resource, 175,000 ounces of gold down dip to the south of an existing 1,500 ton per day operating mill. Resource remains open down dip into the east and west. Trading symbol GOR on the Venture Exchange. Website goldray.com. Or phone me, Larry Ray, at 604-531-9639.
You're watching The Money and Wealth Show, archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. Here's your host, Sterling Fox.
And now, with a final word on today's show, our special guest, Andre Gerolymatos.
The situation in the Middle East is frightening at times, and it's certainly disconcerting. However, I think most people cannot do anything about it. What people can do is try to help the people in Japan. And here's where our influence as individuals or as a collectivity can make an important difference to another people who are going through a great hardship.
Professor Gerolymatos, great to have you on the program, Andre. A real pleasure to see you again. We appreciate your expertise, and we enjoyed the visit. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Andre Gerolymatos from Simon Fraser University. Our thanks to Fritz and the gang at Churchill's and the Holiday Inn in North Vancouver for the hospitality. I'm Sterling Fox for the Money and Wealth Show. See you next time.
The Money and Wealth Show, brought to you this week by American Manganese Incorporated.